Hello, this is Dr. Garret Castleberry, Associate Professor and Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics. In this context, I am coming to you as public speaking instructor. That's right, it's our public speaking fundamentals mini lecture series, and we're nearing the end of the journey, folks. And in my most recent lecture, I talked about informative speaking. We looked at some types and styles of speaking, defined informative speaking for its specific context and purposes. And the focus of this talk is to help us shift gears to think about persuasive speaking and persuasive speech making. All right. And so we'll look at it from a couple of angles and give you some opportunities to learn, hopefully learn and hear by hearing more about persuasion and persuasive speaking. So let's cover some topics as I glance at a couple of notes and reminders here. We want to talk about what makes persuasive presentations unique, types of persuasive presentations, and how we can plan a proper persuasive speech, especially if it's coming from an informative presentation that precedes it, all right? And ultimately, this is going to give us a healthy understanding of the ethical principles surrounding persuasive speech making. So let's recognize that first, the role of the speaker, right? As a persuasive speaker, you're in charge of the message. You're what we call a sender when we refer to that communication model, right? You're a sender or encoder of presenting or providing information. You're sending this message along a channel to a receiver. That receiver is your audience. And sometimes we consume communication, whether it's person to person or perhaps mass communication that we take in, and it is intended to be informative or objective, as I previously discussed when talking about informative speeches. However, when we're crafting a persuasive message, we're taking a next step in a strategic and intentional direction. When we're making a persuasive presentation, we are forming an argument. All right? And before we get deeper into what that is and what it looks like, let's give it a little bit more context, all right? When I use this word, argument, I'm not necessarily talking about starting a fight, right? Bickering, not getting along with an audience. All right, that can be an unhealthy way of presenting information persuasively. What we are trying to do is recognize the tenets of making a clean and clear argument. We're talking about efficiency, people. And so just like I mentioned with the informative speech, persuasive speeches should be limited to approximately 3 main points. And while there are, I guess I should pause and say, there are several different persuasive speech making strategies, but I'll limit most of my time to talking about one of, if not the most effective strategy, especially in the context of a 3-point speech, all right? But let's back up a little bit more and talk about this basic information. So let's define it once more. What is a persuasive presentation? It is the messages that influence an audience's choices. All right. So influence, a key word. Messages that influence an audience's choices by changing their responses toward an idea, issue, concept, or product. Now, I like to use that particular definition, courtesy of McGraw-Hill, right? Courtesy of what is formerly known as the I Speak, right, textbook. One of many that influence our public speaking experience here, but that definition helps us suit our purposes for understanding a persuasive presentation. But let's talk about different types of persuasive speeches, all right? And so this is going to give us a little bit of background that relates to debate, right? Something probably the majority of students in a given public speaking class are less familiar with. but often we can think about refining persuasive speaking or argument making into three different categories. And we can open or close this debate. This is simply our conversation for the sake of efficiency and perhaps picking up more knowledge as we go. The first we can think about is, does my persuasive speech attempt to communicate a question of fact, right? Is the issue or topic I'm engaging in one that we can prove or disprove? And that can be very tricky in the context of, let's say, a 5-minute speech, a 6 or 7 or 8-minute speech. Even if we had 10 minutes to make a persuasive argument, it's hard to convince an issue of fact in such a little bit of time. And now, issues of fact, though, can be successfully argued using the right types of evidence. And this reaches back to previous talk on research and the significance of understanding and being able to locate and organize quality information and resources. So we have questions of fact. There are also persuasive speeches that center on questions of value. It's what we refer to as a value speech. And this values, when we talk about values, these are a little bit more subjective because different people have different values, right? Isn't that part of how we kind of wrestle with things in society all the time because of these differences in value? And absolutely we can affirm that. So that's going to operate differently. You're going to tackle it in a different kind of way than questions of fact. But a third category that I'll quickly mention is when persuasive presentations engage a question of policy. All right, policy is an attempt to examine and evaluate regulations, right, or laws, right? You hear about policies being put into law, and this is where arguments can be formed simply based upon the laws that are agreed upon, right? That are kind of forged together by a given society or people group, right? Nation, state, and so on. So we have these questions of fact, value, and policy, and these are different directions that your persuasive presentation might take. Each of these could hinge upon certain qualities that could, include how socially relevant, or in other words, how topical the focus of your speech is. And we highly encourage that you do engage a topic that does have resonance for the here and now. And as I often encourage students, if you can, the most thoughtful, the most researchable, the most rigorous of informative speeches often make for excellent persuasive speeches if you can put together a deeper understanding of what that topic is engaging, right? And certainly timeliness, significance, resonance for here and now are key factors in determining if your informative topic has the kind of weightiness, importance to carry over into a persuasive speech setting. And not all informative topics do. And that's also important to remember. Sometimes it's better to just start fresh and go in a different direction. But other types of milder types of persuasive speeches could include speeches to inspire. These do exist, and let's be frank. We are persuaded by some of these types of motivational speeches, inspirational speeches, the political speech, right? That could have zero, factual based evidence if the oratory style or the kind of the rousing nature of the delivery has persuasive value, then it's still acting to persuade the audience, even if the content is divisive or perhaps presents some unique challenges, right? Some logical fallacies or those kinds of things. It doesn't deter a speech act from having that value. Speeches to convince may be a large part of what we do. We're wanting to convince someone of either of an idea, of thinking about the world or via the topic in a new light, in a new way. Don't we do this all the time, right? Isn't that a large part of how we communicate about topics we're passionate about? and I mean outside of the context of public speaking. But also, we're going to possibly engage in speeches of action, right? Pew, pew. But when we're talking about speeches of action, this has a purpose of influencing listeners' behaviors. Okay, so you're trying to influence the audience's behavior. That's a classical model of an action speech which is persuasive in its origin. All right, so we can think about those different types. Audience analysis, as I mentioned in my mini talk for informative speaking, audience analysis can help you. It can give you insight. So it's something we can keep in the back of our mind. It's not always something your class will have time to execute, right? And this is even trickier when a class meets online. It's difficult to gather information about your audience to better understand your topic. Sometimes we have to role play our audience, right? And just think about maybe some demographic elements of our audience and make educated guesses about what they do or don't know to solve for how we want to approach what to leave in versus leave out. Put in versus leave out of the speech. Okay, and so let me tackle a couple of other areas and that really will relate to content development, right? How we organize our content. In other words, how do we make an argument? How do we persuade people through the organization of the speech? Not necessarily how we're delivering it, which I'll save for some final commentary here. So let's talk about ways to put together a persuasive speech. When I talked about previously informative speech making, we looked at understanding main point number one. We often need to orient our audience or define key terms or provide background or historical information. That may still be the case in a persuasive speech. We have to assume that our audience has minimal exposure to the ideas and topics that we're presenting them. Okay, so we have to assume they know little about our subject matter. And if you've gone with a topic that you think everyone already knows a lot about, let me just say that might be an immediate red flag that the topic itself is weak. Right? Because what are you going to then bring to the table, right? How do you persuade us about something? Let's say you're trying to tackle a topic that overwhelmingly, hypothetically, 95% of us agree with. Are you effectively persuading then? If it's a topic we already agree with, are you effectively persuading? So that's something to keep in mind as well. Sometimes it's helpful for the sake of the exercise. Maybe we're going against the grain of where we fall on a given topic. And what I mean by that is sometimes taking the opposite side of how we would already traditionally situate ourselves on a given topic or position is fruitful, is healthy, because it gets us creatively thinking outside of the box. And that can yield some strong results as well. But let's talk about building a message. I mentioned a lot of comparison and contrast, pros and cons as the bulk, as the meat of an informative speech. But let's take this a step further with a really simple way to put together your persuasive speech. So while there are many types of persuasive speeches, and I've talked about some of them, and several different strategies that you can use to put them together, and I encourage you to examine additional sources. If you have a course textbook, check out the persuasive chapter. It's always one of the most important chapters, but I'm really going to refine my words to a specific formula that's proven time and time again. And that would be, let's think, if you're bringing over your informative speech into the persuasive speech setting, you are allowed to collapse the essence of that main body into maybe your first main point of the persuasive speech. We don't need to hear everything you've already shared if you're using that similar topic again, but you want to collapse it down. Does that make sense? You want to give us that healthy recap in maybe a main point number one and or part of the introduction, right? So that your peers can recall what you previously talked about before moving further deeper into an argument. But one of the best ways we can think about it is is to revisit or review the situation itself. And so when I say the situation, another way we refer to this is, quote unquote, the problem. All right. And so here's the simple formula: problems, causes, and then I'm going to go ahead and spoil it, solutions, as our main points 1 through 3 in a persuasive speech setting. So let's back up and say, what do we mean by the problem? Well, the problem can sometimes be an actual problem, right? Maybe it's a problem with the law. Maybe it's a problem with values or a belief set. Maybe it's a problem with some way that our society functions. But if it's already the agreed upon way that our society is practicing life, then we can also refer to the problem, quote unquote, as the status quo, the way things are. And so this is where a persuasive exercise can be exciting, because what we're doing is we're challenging our ideas about the way we maybe practice life in a certain way, or practice certain maybe beliefs or execute certain laws or whatever, and we're trying to move forward a conversation, like put the topic on blast, right? We want to examine it critically and potentially provoke an idea that there could be alternative way to practice that status quo, right? The way things are. So we'll think about main point number 1 is going back over the problem. But the problem could also be, any kind of topical issue. Yes. Everything from, when we say topical, we mean timely, we mean of the day, relevant, resonant, not just laws, but maybe experiences that we encounter, right? Types of, prejudice in the world, or working conditions, wages, climate change is certainly something that gets a lot of attention and discussion. So, those kinds of things. Recycling, right? Like taking better care of things or people, or, animals or what have you. These are all social issues, and they make for very enriching topics to cover in a persuasive speech, because there is fertile room for growth, and there is fertile ground for deliberation on the topic. And so just talking about unpacking the subject itself, the problem, should be the focus of your first main point. The second main point is to go into the cause of it. So if we've established the way things are, if we've established an outright problem, then let's talk about causes. This is where a little bit of research on your part, right, or maybe a lot, right, if you're really trying to tackle it ethically, is going to come in handy. And so you're talking about causes. What is the cause of the problem? What was the root cause? Maybe it requires backing up even further, give us even more historical context. In other words, how do we get to this point? Or what are the ongoing factors that are exacerbating this, that are making it heightened or worse, right, or that are revving up certain issues? And so you've established that a thing exists, the social problem, a social issue, a cause, a case, and then you're talking about what is its cause, what is its origin, how did it get to this place, how does it get to this way, and then obviously we're wanting to make a turn. We're not just educating and informing our audience. We're attempting to make an argument, and that's a super exciting thing. And I'm excited to hear many of your arguments coming up. And so, to make an effective argument following this recommended formula, although books and instructions may differ, the recommended follow-up to this would be that main point number 3 focuses on solutions. All right, solutions. And notice I said solutions plural. Let's make a very short list of potential solutions. And I'm using broad terms and phrases, and that is for mass application from this immediate audience, from the listener here, that I'm using broad phrases to describe types of solutions, and you would be then taking those broad phrases and refining it down to concrete examples that relate specifically to your unique topics. All right, just making sure we're on the same page. When we talk about solutions, a list of potential solutions could be, immediate solutions, as in what can I do right now, hands-on, how can I maybe change my behavior or change my thought pattern about it, right? So that's what we mean, local, immediate. Maybe local could also be like community-based types of solutions. But let's also think larger. Local solutions, maybe state solutions, state-based solutions, maybe national solutions. What's something we can tackle maybe on a national front? Is your issue enormous? Is it global, right? Global solutions. What are some global solutions? What are some macro ways we can tackle this problem? And so that you see how that can become a tiered system, right? The individual level, at the local, regional level, at the national or global level. And now we're seeing this spectrum of solutions, and that is giving us much more momentum and much more to chew on as an audience. We're taking the persuasive speech more seriously if we have multiple types of solutions to said problem. Let's talk about other ways of thinking about solutions. Maybe, because remember, your arguments, your persuasive speeches could be based on fact, could be based on policy, could be based on value. They could be based on other factors, right? Depending on the instructions, depending on the topic, depending on the choices you make, and you do have a lot of choice in this. But let's talk about other types of solutions. Sometimes the solutions could be financial solutions. Sometimes it's social solutions, cultural solutions, economic solutions, as I've already teased here. And so you can think about, anything that can be modified or enhanced, changed, right, is a potential solution, right? And you don't have to get lost in the weeds of the cause and effect of the solutions or whatever, but it's great to map out some strategies. And we don't just want you to present a single type of solution every single time, because that creates room for questioning, right? It gives us more reason to doubt your persuasive message. And we don't want to do that. We want to be able to buy in to your persuasive message. And so be sure you can articulate a nice little range of potentially 2 to 3 working solutions that meet your problem, your persuasive topic head on. All right, so thank you for listening to this. I recommend that. But one more quick item before we close out this persuasive talk is delivery, right? We've been working all course long toward the grand finale, which is often the persuasive speech, or at least the persuasive speech is on deck toward the end, right? Because we're building toward it. This should be your show-off speech. This should be your most polished and articulate and perhaps intensified speech effort yet. So let's take in all of those factors for this final speech, right? What is your level of professional attire? What is your level of audience engagement? Eye contact. How are you projecting your voice? Are you speaking in a persuasive manner? And let's just recognize that there is a difference between if I'm giving a very static, monotone kind of delivery, and in no way is kind of moving you to action, versus if I've got urgency and I'm showing that I care about my topic and I want you to buy into this idea, even if you disagree, even if I can't convince you in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, about my topic. At least I can get you remembering the speech effort. I can be persuasive through my delivery style. And that is something we so often forget, right? We're not trusting ourselves enough yet. Like it's an opportunity to really liberate ourselves and get out on a limb there. And buy into this idea that how we present a speech is sometimes, and this is true of society. This is true in politics. This is true in so much of the world, that how we deliver a message is as significant as what that message is. As tragic as that may seem, as imbalanced as that may seem, it's a fact of life, because we're all humans, right? We're human. We have human behaviors. We're human creatures, right? We're drawn to certain qualities, and let's pull out the best qualities that we have to offer in this final presentation. Let's make sure we're right there in the frame, not too far away. Hello, not too close up. But let's get right here with our audience. for that persuasive speech effort. Of course, I'm in a controlled area. I'm giving a longer talk. If you're putting together a video persuasive speech, then you know it's proper that you're standing, that you're keeping steady, keeping still. Only having utilizing body movement or hand gestures or what have you. If it's kind of both strategic and organic in a controlled way, right? Natural gesturing is great, but if we have habits that are too repetitive, those can distract. So this is the total package, right? The persuasive presentation. And we'll look forward to watching and evaluating your persuasive speech efforts and us conquering this public speaking journey together. Thank you for listening.